Hello, beautiful souls. Today's episode is so good. And before we jump in, I have some exciting news to share. If you've ever wondered where you're blocking money, this is for you. I've created a free quiz to diagnose your money wounds so you can heal them and unblock yourself to receive more money. Just go to moneywoundsquiz.com and answer 6 quick questions to get your insanely accurate and potent results. And if you're loving my vibe and want to work one-on-one to call in more feminine energy wealth, I would love to hear from you. You can shoot me a DM on social media or go to emilywilcox.com to learn more. Hello and welcome back to the Makes Money Show. You guys, I have such a great conversation in store for you with an incredible guest speaking about such an important topic. And before I jump into it, I will say that the topic for today's conversation for many of us will require a level of openness and curiosity that we may not always access, that may feel a little harder to access on this topic, but is so worthy. The first step to, I think, healing is really just understanding and being open to hearing someone else's perspective and getting curious and learning about other people's perspectives. And so my guest today is Emily Anne Brant, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about her in a second, but we're talking about this intersection of decolonization and manifestation. And I have just been so thrilled to see the way that Emily has stepped into her leadership and is talking about this online, and is talking about the way that the coaching industry has been colonized and the way that white women need to show up in order to be able to hold space for the global majority. And I will tell you, this is an area where I am absolutely a student of the game, not an expert. And so it felt really good to be able to create a stage and hand over a microphone to someone who is an expert and is willing to share this message for all of us. And so it feels appropriate to start my little opening riff, just like acknowledging all of my privileges. And, I'm probably going to butcher this, but I've heard privilege defined as like, it's not necessarily where you're ahead as much as it's a place that hasn't set you behind. And the reason I like that definition is that I think sometimes it's hard for people to say like, yeah, I'm privileged in this area, because they feel like their life was still hard. And it's like, we can have a hard life and we can still have privilege. It just means that we weren't also set back because of other things, right? And so there are plenty of people who have thought leadership and who study this and who share it so much more eloquently than me. And I will be the first to say that one of my fears in bringing this topic to the podcast is that I screw it up, that I put my foot in my mouth, that I say something dumb, that I'm like not as woke as I should be. But we got to get over ourselves and be willing to have the conversation. And if we screw it up, then so be it. So yeah, for me, like growing up with white skin, growing up in the United States, growing up in a family where my parents were not divorced, where my parents were college educated, where my parents didn't suffer from any severe mental illness, where there wasn't intentional trauma or abuse happening in my household. Growing up middle class, like being resourced financially enough to where I was never worried about there being food on the table or there being a roof over my head. And, those of you who know my story and have tuned into the podcast for a while now know that money was the root of all disagreements in our household. So it wasn't like things felt easy breezy financially by any means. And yet there was so much privilege baked in there. And, I've always felt like if I ever really screwed something up or totally made financial mistakes, if, the shit ever hit the fan, like I could move in with my parents, or I could go stay with one of my sisters for a while. And like, that's privilege too, like having that safety net and knowing that there are places that we can go and people who can truly help us put a roof over our head and put food on the table if things ever go totally sideways is really important, especially in this entrepreneurial world where we're making decisions that can feel really scary and sometimes feel like our survival is on the line. Okay, what else? I'm so grateful for, the privilege of being able-bodied, like not having any physical disabilities or any mental disabilities. Neurodivergence has been a big topic in the online world lately. And while I certainly, many of my clients actually are neurodivergent and we're learning how to like tap into that as a superpower. And yet I'm privileged that, my brain works in a more conventional way that worked with conventional education. And so I grew up thinking that I was like smart and successful and a good listener and like was praised for all of the ways that I fit the mold. And so, that gave me an identity that kind of set me ahead in the sense that, I wasn't having to undo the conditioning of thinking that I wasn't smart or I didn't know how to learn or I couldn't sit still or I was a troublemaker in the classroom and that kind of thing. Let's see. I feel so grateful for, the privilege of also having healthy children, being able to have kiddos and have them easily. Like I could just go on and on and on. And, my purpose in saying this is not to create an exhaustive list, but just to model and practice saying and acknowledging these things myself, because that's something that Emily and I talk about in this episode, and that she really calls on, white women, white leaders, white coaches to do a better job of. So here we are. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about Emily Brant. She is an indigenous author, speaker, and mentor working at the intersection of personal development and decolonization. She's on a mission to decolonize the personal development industry. She works with women of the global majority, so BIPOC women. And as an empowerment coach, she is also a consultant for ally coaches who want to decolonize their business. And at the heart of it all, she's fostering communities where everyone feels seen, safe, and truly supported so that we can all rise together. I love it so much. You guys are going to absolutely love this interview. So without further ado, let's jump in. I'm so happy to be here today with Emily Brant. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Emily. It's good to be here.
Yeah, Emily is Unite.
Fellow
we are going
Emily.
to be talking today about your personal business building story and really how that's evolved into your mission of decolonizing the coaching industry. And I think also just shedding a lot of light on kind of this intersection of decolonization and manifestation. So like big topics and so much to dive into. But I think where a smart place to start is really just you sharing your story and how you were in the coaching industry and how it felt as a client and sort of how that evolved into what you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. So, hello, everyone listening. For those of you who don't know me, I am a First Nations person with indigenous ancestry on my dad's side and mixed indigenous and settler ancestry on my mom's side. And I've been into personal development, like the law of attraction, all of that stuff since I was a little kid. I've just always loved it, always been drawn to it. And what it took me a really long time to realize is how colonized personal development as an industry really is and how really whitewashed it is. Because even though a lot of the principles that are being shared actually come from indigenous wisdom, indigenous teachings, which I did grow up learning. Growing up on a First Nations reserve, we were taught the importance of gratitude and the importance of positive mind and giving thanks for all of creation. And we have a like much different definition of abundance than what we hear people talking about now, which I'm sure you and I will chat about because this is a money podcast and you're money queen. So we can have a good chat about abundance as well. But yeah, so I've been into personal development for a long time. But since I have mixed ancestry and I have light skin, I'm also, what you'd call like white passing or white presenting. I present as white. And because of the racism I've experienced as a kid and as a teenager and a young adult, it just became easier to ignore my indigeneity and just act white and lean into my whiteness. And so that's what I did in all areas of life, including in this world of personal development. So I was, like everyone else, taking all of the courses and reading all of the books that are mostly written by white men and women on things like law of attraction and money and positive thoughts and all of that. And it was not until maybe a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, that I had to stop and say, like I've been at this work for over a decade, right? Like literally since I was a kid, 2 decades. And something is always feeling sticky. Something is always feeling off. And why is this not fully clicking for me? And so I actually had a spiritual reading with an Akashic Records reader, and Spirit was telling me, oh, you still have work to do around your self-worth, and it's related to your indigenous ancestry. And when I heard that, I was like, no, I know that I'm worthy. Like, this is ridiculous. Of course, I know I'm worthy. I do affirmations every day. Like, I know I'm worthy. I'm just like that money's not coming in. It's just not showing up. I know I'm worthy of it though. And they were like, no, there's healing to do. And it's related to your indigenous side. And when I heard that, I thought, but I had abandoned that side of me for so long and disconnected with it. I thought, I'm not even indigenous enough to have like racial pain and oppressive pain and things to heal from, because I didn't really let myself go there. And they were like, and Spirit was like, well, that's part of the problem too, is not feeling indigenous enough. And that, of course, right, just leads to, I am not enough. So I think now in my business, I attract a lot of mixed race folks, because that is a big thing that we have to heal from, is not feeling like we're ever enough, no matter where we go. We don't totally fit in with the indigenous folks, or we don't totally fit in with the white folks. And so that was another thing to heal. And so once I started going down that path and connecting with ancestors and looking into all of the healing that needed to be done around the intergenerational pain and the racism I'd been through and the oppression and the feeling of not enough, there was just so much there. And then once I went to take that to my mastermind that I was in, to my coach that I was working with, to my peers that I was working with, who were all white women, it was like nobody knew how to hold it. It was like a hot potato, like what is this? And it was just met with literally like crickets. And I was like, wow, these spaces no longer feel safe. These spaces no longer feel like they can hold me or support me, now that I am not just acting like a white woman. And so that's when I realized that's really what sparked the work I do now, which is helping coaches to be able to hold space for conversations and healing like this, because my story is not unique. There's a lot of people who have to heal through these things. And once I did, since acknowledging these bigger pieces that needed to be healed and no longer allowing myself to bypass them and gaslight myself, everything's shifted. And money and business is now flowing so much more smoothly. And now I get it. And like, now I get what people are talking about with quantum leaps and rapid growth, because now I'm experiencing it, that I've kind of decolonized this world of personal development for myself.
I love this so much. And it's like, it gives me chills, because it just feels like you're so living your soul mission now. Like you are doing the work that you're meant to be doing. And so in a way, it's like, yes, of course you had to go through that. And also, it's like, it breaks my heart that you brought that into a mastermind and everyone's like, oh, okay. Like, we don't know what to do with that. And so what should people be doing with that? Because I think that's your work now. How should we be creating safe spaces for people to bring generational traumas and ancestral healing and all of these things that like we as a coach may not have personally had an experience with. And how do we create safe spaces for it?
Yeah. That's such an important question, and it's a big question. So I'll do my best to answer, as much as I can in the time we have here. But I always say it comes down to three things. I have a framework that I break the decolonization work down into, and it's mindset, words, and actions, all of which matter in creating safe and welcoming spaces for everyone. And so the first mindset really represents educating yourself, right? Learning about the oppression, the pain that indigenous people, for example, have gone through, or Black people, anyone in the, colonized country where you reside, learn about the land that you're on, learn about different people's oppressive influences and cultural influences so that they don't have to spend time explaining to you what, like, because if we're a friend of mine who was just on my podcast, her name's Izu, she was explaining on her podcast, like, if I go to a therapist who's not, and Izu's a Black woman, if I go to a therapist who is not also a Black woman or person, and I have to waste my time explaining why I feel the way I feel and why I have, the oppressive pain, then who's paying who? Like, right. You should be paying me, not the other way around, right? So you don't want your clients to have to waste time explaining, like, what are residential schools, right. Like how just a couple generations ago, they might have had people that were slaves or that were owned by white families in their family. And they might have been impacted directly by, residential schools or different oppressive influences. So, of course, you can't know everything about everyone, but do as much as you can to commit to your own unlearning, because we unfortunately don't live in a society that teaches us the real truth about the lands that we occupy and the places we live. So it's on us to do our own education and unlearn what we were taught and relearn the truth, and not expect our clients especially to be the ones teaching us that. So that's the first thing, is really mindset. And I could keep going with mindset, but there's a whole course coming out where I'm going to go over mindset, words, actions. I have my master class too. But another piece of mindset is just like looking at all the ways in which coaching has become colonized, and entrepreneurship in general. It's all through a very colonial lens, a very capitalistic lens. It kind of lost its original soul and origins. So it examining like, oh, that does come from like patriarchal influence, or, oh, that is really capitalistic. And getting back to the roots of, why we do what we do, which is healing and community and connection. And so, that's all part of decolonizing. And then like words and actions. So decolonization and creating safe spaces, it doesn't really matter if you're learning and unlearning, if you're not actually speaking up and saying words that matter to make people feel safe and included, right? And actually, my friend Izu, who I was just talking about, corrected me yesterday on my podcast, because I was saying it's brave of white women to talk about this stuff. And she was like, no, it's not. Let's not use the word bravery. It's accountability. Like, if your life is not on the line like ours is as Black, Indigenous, and Brown people who have actually been oppressed, if you've not actually experienced oppression, speaking up is not bravery. It's just accountability. Like, it's just the right thing to do. And I was like, whoa, that is so true. So I'm going to stop using the word bravery. But using your words to first, like, the biggest thing is acknowledging where you hold privilege. So if I were to look to work with a mentor and it was a white woman or white person, one of the things I would look for is, are you acknowledging your privilege? Are you seeing your privilege? Are you just showing up and speaking through a very white lens and a very privileged lens? Because if you are, then I know incidents like the ones I've experienced are going to happen when I get into your container, and it's just going to be very not productive for me, right? Or possibly not even safe for me. Right. So using words that matter, acknowledging privilege especially, and then also acknowledging what you will never understand, but just saying. So for example, if I came to the group and I said, hey, so this is what I said. I was like, hey everyone, I'm working through this huge, basically identity crisis right now. I'm realizing how much needs to be healed, how much ancestral pain I've been carrying, how I've been feeling not indigenous enough, but not white enough, and how I've been just basically acting white because that was safer. And there's all this stuff coming up, and it's just a lot to hold. So I wanted to bring it to the group for support. And what happened was the mentor just liked the message, like just a heart reaction. And that was it. Never spoke to it. And one of my best friends in the group replied, and one other woman replied, but nobody else did. So what I would do if I was the mentor, I would say, wow, thank you so much for bringing this here. I really appreciate it. And I know that it may have felt scary to bring it here. I know that I could never understand what you're going through and what you've been through and what your community's been through. And I know that, but I want to hold space for you for as much as you want to share, as much as you want to unpack with us, as much as you feel safe sharing. I'm here for that. And just putting your own discomfort aside, right? Like, who cares if it triggers your own white privilege or makes you look at your privilege? It's your job to put that aside and say, you know, what can I do to hold space for you? Yeah. And so it's not even so much about like having the right thing to say or trying to fix. Like, definitely don't try to fix it and be like, oh, this is another experience I had. The mentor was like, does that have to be your reality though? Because you can just choose a different story. When I was speaking about how there's inequalities, and I was talking to my mentor, Asha Frost, my friend Asha Frost, about how she's also witnessed her white counterparts just completely take off. And she's doing the exact same things, and her business moves a lot slower. And this is because of biases that exist and racism that exists, and people still expecting, even if it's subconsciously, expecting and demanding more labor for less money from indigenous folks, right? Expecting our services to be cheap or free. And more barriers do exist. Like, that's real 3D facts that exist. And this mentor said to me, does that have to be your story though? You can just choose a different story. And that is like the most bypassing kind of gaslighting thing you could say, because no, you can't change these very real 3D systemic things that occur just by shifting our thoughts. And it puts the blame and shame on us when real systems of oppression exist. So yeah, that's kind of like a little what not to do. Don't try to fix it with mindset. And your job isn't to fix it. You just need to hold space. That's it. You don't have to fix it. Yeah. And then,
no, I really appreciate those examples, because I think it's so helpful and tangible for people. And in some respects, it's shocking to me. And like, I still have my own work to do, and I'm always working to get better as a coach and a mentor as well. And, but like, there are so many things that my clients bring to me that I don't have lived experience of. And so it's sort of surprising that maybe this topic feels scarier. And so that's why it's being mishandled. And there's just like more to be done, or perhaps it does feel, you know, if you've got like settler heritage, then maybe it does feel like triggering or put you on the defensive, even if it's just subconsciously. I'm curious what you think about that, because like, for example, you know, I have clients who have been victims of sexual assault. I have not. And yet, like, they bring that into my spaces, and we talk about it and we unpack it. And like you said, I hold space for it. And I'm not trying to act as though I've had that lived experience, but I can still help them see the ways that it's currently playing out in their business, in other relationships. So do you think there is something different about specifically race, ancestry, colonization that makes coaches so ill-equipped to look at it and hold space for it if they haven't done any work around it?
That's a tough question, because I never like to compare trauma or compare oppression. Like, for example, I don't want to say, yes, racial oppression is much worse or much different than sexual assault, for example. But I do think it's interesting. I think as women, even if you haven't experienced the sexual violence or assault, all women, especially white women, are very much aware of the oppression women face in the patriarchy, right? But yet, so many are just seeing feminism even through that white lens. And so it's called white feminism. And they can easily see the ways in which women are oppressed and maybe easily hold space and make these like sister circles. But these sister circles and sisterhoods are still not built for Black, Brown, and Indigenous women, because everything is just being seen through the gender lens. And I think if you don't go out of your way to unlearn that white lens, and to learn the things you don't know about folks of the global majority, then it's going to be difficult to hold space for those types of conversations. And it happens a lot, especially in the coaching industry, that white feminism, where we can see the ways in which women are oppressed, but we can't see the ways in which we are simultaneously, like white women are simultaneously oppressing Black, Brown, and Indigenous women. So I do think it's different, and it's not helpful to compare. Like if, for example, you were to have, and I know you're obviously not doing this, like you're having clients and you say, I don't have that lived experience, but I can still hold space. So the same thing would apply to a person who's bringing forward racial pain and trauma. But in a group setting, for example, it kind of goes one layer deeper, because you also need to know how to hold space and manage the whole community and have guidelines that this is an anti-racist space, right? This is a active, brave, anti-racist, decolonized space, so that everyone else in the space is also going to know how to hold space and not create any microaggressions, and not harm the person that's sharing. So there's a lot of layers and things that go into creating these spaces, other than just being able to say, I don't have the lived experience, but I hope you'll feel safe with me. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, especially when people of the global majority have been burned by white folks so many times. It's unfortunately like not enough just to say, you're safe to share this with me, because so many people will not feel safe, even if they don't know you, they've just met you. Like, there is a lot of trust that needs to be built between people of global majority and white folks. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying about the mindset, words, and actions. I never got to the action part. So are you also taking actions inside and outside of your containers, to show consistently, day after day after day, that you are in the journey of learning and unlearning? You are committed to rebalancing the scales, to making things right. So are you doing things like hiring folks of the global majority, working with them, learning from them? Are you committing a certain portion of your income to hiring, or a certain amount of your hiring? I can't think of the word, but you know what I mean? The percentage of the people you hire, are you committed to making sure those are BIPOC or global majority folks? What organizations and things are you giving back to? What are you learning? What are you sharing about your learning? And we need to see those all three things, that you're doing the mindset, the words, and the actions, because one without the other, they're kind of empty on their own.
Yeah, that's such a good point. So I want to talk about the part of your story that is that intersection of the decolonization work and like manifestation or law of attraction. This is something that it's actually sort of satisfying curiosity, or a question that's been in the back of my mind for a while. Like, I went to an Abraham Hicks workshop live, for the first time recently, and I raised my hand for like one of the hot seats or whatever, but was also really scared. Like, she almost pointed at me and I was like, oh God, I take it back. Because the question that I wanted to ask was around spiritual bypassing. And that's like the criticism of that work. And I was curious, like, what Abraham would say about that. And so, like, I still want to know the answer. But I'm curious because like what I've seen for myself is that usually like if something's coming up, it's actually like better to lean into the shitty feeling or like the discovery, like let it all fall apart first. And then it's naturally easier to start like reaching for a better feeling thought. But like to try to do that without first like going into the muck, I've found not to be very effective. But I'm curious, like from this bigger lens of like unpacking, like, is law of attraction for me? Does manifestation work for me as someone who's part of the global majority? How do you see that working?
Yeah. So there's definitely validity to the law of attraction and to work like Abraham Hicks's, work. I think there's a time and a place for it, and to go on those sort of positive gratitude, upward or downstream thoughts, whatever it is that she says. There's a time to go on those rampages of like positive thoughts and affirmations and thinking good thoughts. And this is part of, like I was saying, what I was taught in my culture as a Mohawk woman. Like my mentor who knew nothing, my cultural mentor who knew nothing about like this new age spirituality. I was like, do you know what shadow work is? And he's like, no, I didn't know anything about that. But he was teaching me, the importance of starting every single day with gratitude. And we give thanks to all of creation. And the importance of a good mind is one of the, like the Haudenosaunee people, which Mohawks are a part of, the Haudenosaunee Six Nations. So we believe there's three core pillars, and one is a good mind. So it's peace, strength, and a good mind, which is the importance of thinking positively, right? So definitely positive thoughts, they matter. But like you said, there is a time and a place when negative emotions come up, and we aren't meant to just ignore them and pretend they're not there and place these positive thoughts and words over top of them. That's when it becomes toxic positivity and bypassing, because things come up for a reason. And when we ignore them, they manifest in our body as illness. They create all kinds of problems, and they just get deeper and deeper rooted. So of course, like any shadow work, we need to not bypass it. We need to address it and heal it. But yeah, there's still a time and place for positive thinking, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. And what's your, I think you posted something on Instagram about this recently that was so good around cultural appropriation and like, where's the line? And I get that, like, you don't necessarily get to be the one deciding person who says, here's where the line is. But I do think for many of us, there is kind of this feeling of like, where is the line? What's okay? What's not okay? What's honoring of the heritage? If it's doing good, does it even matter? Like, and just wrestling with these questions, and you do such a good job of breaking them down. So I'd love for you to just share here.
Yeah, thank you. That's a big question. There is a lot of resources on my Instagram, and I will be going really deep with this on my course as well. And I have some podcasts on this too, because there's so many different topics to cover. But basically, if you're questioning where's the line, or like, I don't know if this is okay, it's probably not okay if you're already questioning it. And then there are the people who completely think it's okay, and they're just totally ignorant and oblivious, and they think everything's fine. But those are likely not the people listening to this podcast, likely not the people we're speaking to right now. So let me just say, if you have that feeling of like, is this okay? It's still helping people. Like, I want to share about chakras, which are actually chakras, and everyone's pronouncing them chakras. We anglicized the word and just whitewashed it, and just so cultural appropriation is when you take the parts of a culture that is not yours. Usually this is done by a more dominant group, aka white folks. You take the shiny, pretty, great parts of a culture that you like for your own personal gain, benefit, or profit. And that's the literal definition of cultural appropriation. So if you're just taking, let's say, the chakra system and you are using it for your own gain and profit, you're going to make a course around it, you're going to make money off of it, then you definitely need to be looking at, because I get it, like if something really resonates with you and you want to share it and it's really helped you heal, you're going to want to share that with others. But the things you want to look for is then where did I learn this from? Was it from an authentic Indian, South Asian person, or was it from another white teacher or institution that is going to also benefit off of stealing someone else's culture? So who did I learn it from? Am I giving back to the communities from, who the culture is from, who the teachings are from? And am I holding this with the reverence and the respect that it deserves, and acknowledging regularly? If you're going to share, if you're going to borrow other people's culture, you need to know, you need to do your work and know where it comes from, who you learned it from, acknowledge that publicly every time you share it, and bring in other experts when you can who are actually from that culture, because those are ways to kind of appreciate versus appropriate. So those are some things that you can and should do if you're going to use other cultures. And the reason, I can almost hear people asking like, well, what's the big deal? Aren't we all supposed to share and enjoy each other's, cultures and things we bring to the world? The reason it's hurtful and problematic is because all of these cultures that get taken from all the time, like indigenous people, for example, we have been painfully disconnected from the culture. We were told, no, those things are wrong. Those things are demonic. Those things are evil. Those things are bad. We were stripped away from having access to them. And now the ancestors of the ones who stole them and took them away are now packaging them up and selling them and profiting off of them. So that's really messed up, right? And it's really hurtful. And so it's just important that if you are going to help us revitalize the culture, then also are you willing to lean in and look at our pain and oppression and support us in that, and support us in decolonization?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And obviously at the end of this podcast, we'll make sure that people have ways to connect with you. But I just, want to give a shout out because Emily's Instagram is incredible. She shares a lot of free resources there, but then she also has a lot of great paid programs and ways to plug in. Like I've done your roundtable. I know I'm going to do more with you because it is, does need to be an ongoing commitment to this work. And it's something that, I'm wanting to do a better job with as well. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing to make it accessible, easily digestible, and something where, we don't have the excuses of like, oh, I'll get to that later. It's like,
thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
I try to make it as like digestible and bite-sized and foolproof as possible. So like you said, no excuses. And I literally have like a free guide if you can't even do the masterclass right now. So, or my Instagram, but yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So weaving in a little bit more of your personal story, you kind of shared that like you were investing a lot in yourself, you were doing the inner work, and it sort of felt like it wasn't translating to your bank account until you started doing the ancestral work and the shadow work and the deeper healing. And then I'll also combined with, I would say, some business strategy as well, right? Like pivoting your business and pivoting your messaging. And all of a sudden is in air quotes if you can't see me, because I love Steve Jobs' quote where he's like, I'm always amazed at how long it takes to become an overnight success.
Yes.
And it's so true. It's like the people who are jumping into your Instagram now when it's like everything's popping, they may not have seen what everything that led up to now.
Yes.
But I just love if you're willing to get a little more open about, like, what did the money look like then? How does manifestation and money and new clients feel for you now?
Yeah, definitely. And to be clear, so I started coaching in 2019. I started joining this whole world more actively, taking the courses, taking the masterminds, taking the business programs, all of that. And I was doing shadow work. I was doing a ton of shadow work, like most especially with my inner child and my body image. So I've done a lot of healing around my body image. I was born into a lot of physical differences and adversities, and have done a lot of work around that, which has helped in many ways. And in the beginning of, it's been an interesting journey because I started at the end of 2019. I launched my first course at the end of 2019, and it actually went really well. It was off to a really good start. And I guess I just hit a certain level and then kind of plateaued, right? So I actually pretty quickly was able to get a few people in my first ever course, sign some one-on-one clients, hit my first 5K month. If you want to like talk numbers, 5K month, got to a point where I had consistently in air quotes again, pretty consistently, like between 5 and 9K a month for a few months. This was in 2020 now. So it took a while. Like the first year was very sporadic, but it was okay. It was still all exciting because I was just growing and I still had a full-time job at the same time. And then in 2020, I had my biggest month ever in May, I think it was. And that was like the 9 point something K month. And it was my first month that was really, really good. And I'm like, I'm going to quit my job because there's so much pressure in this industry. Like, you know how it is. You got to go all in. You got to be all in. Like that's the goal, is you do this so you can quit your job. And I was at a very unhealthy job that was not good for my soul at all. It was really toxic corporate environment. So I was excited to leave, and I'm like, I got this. I had like 2 good months in a row. I'm like, yeah, I got this. I'm quitting my job. So I quit my job and I went all in. And I just wanted to learn how to get to the next level. Like I was already doing pretty good with all the mindset work. Again, not looking at the ancestral pain, not looking at the racial pain. And so basically it was working for me until it wasn't. And I felt stuck. I felt that stuckness. I felt, okay, I've been at this a while now, and another half a year went by, and not only did I not move forward, but my money moved backwards. And especially because I had that pressure of having left my job, it was like, now I need my business to make money. And now there's this kind of desperation energy attached to it, right? Which is what happens when you don't have that stability. And it's also, this is another like race thing, I think, too, is people's nervous systems are wired differently. So I think there is a lot of people, especially white folks, who thrive under that like do or die pressure, that all in, play with fear for fun, like let the fear expand you. That does not work for me as an Indigenous woman. Like that feeling of survival mode really triggered some seriously deep intergenerational crap, right? Like it was like survival mode, I'm not safe. And so I think when we come from such deep lines of oppression, that survival mode is different. But even then I didn't realize, I wasn't seeing it through a race lens. So I was just like, I don't know what's happening. I hired a mentor. This is where the story gets like really cringy and embarrassing, but it's fine because if people can learn from my story, then good. So then I hired a mentor who's talking about 5D and escaping the 3D reality, which is where we see even more of the bypassing and don't let human things affect you. You're a limitless soul. You just need to get out of your head and you need to get into the 5th dimension. And now even when I hear the word 5D, I'm like, I want to barf because I just had such a bad experience with this person. Right. But at the time, like I'm in a vulnerable position, right? My money is dwindling. I see this person talking about all the money they're making. I see their videos blowing up. So I'm like, okay, maybe they're onto something and they're saying they have all this money. So I work with this person, and it was basically the worst experience I've ever had with a mentor. It was horrible, like manipulation, spiritual abuse, psychological abuse, being told like, basically this person has to get downloads for me and I can't trust myself. So it separated me from my own intuition. And my business just completely went backwards and crumbled even more from there. And so basically I had to get to a complete rock bottom, like a complete dark night of the soul is what it literally honestly felt like. I felt so low, and I've never struggled with depression or anything like that, but I felt super low, super depressed. And this was right before my wedding. So I was supposed to get married.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing. I've like no money. I am feeling so embarrassed about where my life is and how I got there, and like everything crumbled. And so now we're in 2021, and I'm like, great, this is how I'm starting my marriage. Like, awesome. And so that was like the rock bottom for me. And I had to really pause. I canceled my mentorship experience. I asked to get out of the program. And I just took a pause from any and all mentorship and really had to find my way back to my own voice again, find my way back to spirit, to creator, to ancestors, and find me again. And then later that year, so the end of 2021 now, I started rebuilding and creating offers that were more from me, from my own voice, from my soul. But I still ended up putting a lot out there that was, I didn't realize it, but it was still the voice of that mentor who really got in my head. And I put out a lot of these like toxic, bypassing, kind of like, we're all one, we're all limitless, those types of messages. And then I had that, rejoined a business mastermind, had that experience of realizing, okay, spirit's telling me it's related to my ancestry. It wasn't held. And then I realized, okay, that's when my business kind of pivoted into, so I guess this is early 2022, into decolonization work. And since then, and I mean, I guess it's been over a year, but my first official offer, I started mostly with speaking gigs, and I did a speaking gig for a big university here in Canada in February 2022 on decolonizing business and success. And then since then, I just, kept talking about the topic more and more. October 2022 was my first, the roundtable offer, my first event to actually gather coaches and talk about this. And that was such a success. There was like over 30 people who joined the first round. And just people started sharing my work. People still share my work for me literally every day. And it's just been kind of taking off in a sense. And yeah, like you said earlier, I really feel like I am doing my soul's, I'm really doing what I came here to do. It's just a really windy, weird, crazy road that most people didn't see. Most people have only come into my world in the last little while, but it's been a wild journey getting here. And yeah, the money is flowing as a result. Of course, the money is also flowing a lot more steadily as well. And I have a job. I got a job in about a year ago. My contract's almost up, but I got a full-time job working in indigenous communications management for an indigenous health team. So I was really passionate about that too. And it's proof that you don't have to do a soul sucking job. Like, not all jobs have to be soul sucking. I actually love it there, and get to work with indigenous elders and do all types of like spiritual retreats. And so it's been amazing to see how I can do both, and you can get to stability. And I think that stability also has contributed to allowing other abundance to flow in, because now I'm not in that survival mode.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad to hear you share that, because it's been something that's been coming up more and more. I've been talking about it on other podcasts too. Like, we've really done damage with this idea that all in means like give yourself no safety and stability and just hope that you can like manifest it all out of thin air.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not most people's story. It's just not like, and I have the privilege of like interviewing so many people, and that is rarely is that the story. Most of the time it's like slow and measured, or like I lived at my parents' house while I built this, or I had a job, or my spouse paid all of our bills while I got this up and running. Like, we have to have something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
it's such a gift to ourselves.
Yeah, it really is. And it's such a, I think it's such a small percentage of people that do or die energy does work for. Like I said, there are very rare few people that thrive under that pressure.
Yeah.
But definitely not people of the global majority. I don't think, just because of
No.
all the survival trauma and things.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you surpassed your previous best month of like the 9 point whatever K?
I have not yet. No. So since that 9 point something K month, then it kind of like dwindled and dwindled, and then it was like nothing for months and months. So really, it's almost like I'm building a brand new business because
Right.
it's all new offers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really am. It's all new offers. It's the roundtable was a small masterclass. So that's not a ton of money to come in. And then I made little like mini bundles that I sold over November, December, January. That brought in a little influx of cash. So like January was 6,700. It was just under 7K, but that's the most I've made since 2020. And it's basically a brand new business. So I'm really happy with that. And that's on top of my, my full-time income, which is nice.
Yeah.
And
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And then, obviously as I build out my product suite more, like the course is coming, and that'll be a 1K course. And then there's one-on-one offers out there too. So like once it's all kind of built, I know it'll just keep growing.
I yes, zero doubt. Like you being wildly successful at this is inevitable. It's already happening. And like there's no race or rush for it either, but I feel like that'll be a fun milestone when you surpass like your previous best month and the money is coming in this way that just feels like so aligned to your soul mission.
Yeah, it will be fun. Thank you. And I'm just like noticing now how kind of what's the word? Detached I am, like not detached, but very relaxed about it. Like I know it'll come too, and it'll come when it comes. And I'm really something that all my clients and students know that I always talk about is turtle medicine. So I'm really embodying this like slow down to speed up, and it is life changing. So I'm just like, it'll happen when it happens. It's inevitable. And the old me would have been like, why didn't it happen in January? Like now February has to be the one. And like, people are going to ask me when I beat my last good month. And like, realistically, no one really cares because everyone's worrying about themselves. And like you said, like it's inevitable anyway. So if it's inevitable, what's the rush?
Totally. I love that so much. Yes, I have seen you talk about turtle medicine and I'm like, oh, I love that perspective. Amazing. Well, I really want you to share all of the ways to connect with you and not just your free resources, because I want to challenge all of us, like myself included, to be paying for this work. And I really think that you have ways that are accessible at every price point. So if you can just share both your social media handles and also some of your offers that literally someone could buy today.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm on Instagram at Emily Anne Brant, and all of my offers are always there in my bio. I'm on TikTok at Emily Anne Brant as well. And it's Anne with an E, but I'm sure we'll link it in the show notes for you. And I have the Roundtable Masterclass, which is now going to be a 2-day workshop that is live in March, but you can always purchase it anytime, get the instant access to the replay. Emily went through it. A lot of coaches have, more than 46 now, I think, coaches have gone through it. And it's a really in-depth masterclass on how to make your business more diverse, more inclusive, and decolonized. And it's $88. And then there's going to be a course coming up this spring, April. That is a 6-week course, and we're going to have some epic guest workshops and really go into depth, like step by step, rebuilding the foundation of your business so that you're built on a foundation of decolonization instead of on a foundation of colonialism and capitalism. And that's really the smartest investment you can make in your business, because we, the global majority, make up more than 80% of the population. So why would you not want to learn how to tap into potentially like 80% more clients, right? So there's the masterclass, there's the course, and then I always have one-on-one little upgrades and offers going on as well. So just come hang out with me on social media and you'll see all the things there.
Amazing. Emily, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your personal story and also for the work that you're doing and the pathways that you're creating for so many, especially white coaches, to feel safe and comfortable and actually feel excited about doing this work. So really appreciate you. Are there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share?
Thank you. I guess I would just say, yeah, I do get excited about this work, and that, thank you for saying that, because I do think decolonization work, anti-racism work, it doesn't have to be like boring or obligatory charity. It's actually exciting. And if you're into personal development, if you are a person who's like, yes, I'm willing to get uncomfortable to grow, I'm willing to face my shadows, there is no personal development work like decolonization and like looking at your privilege and unpacking it. Like, this is the work that will grow you as a human, that will grow your business, and that will improve your whole entire life. So that's what I want to say on that. And yeah, I think we covered a lot of good topics already today. So thank you so much, Emily, for having me.
Amazing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's show. Before you go, I have something fun to share. Now, when you leave a review of the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, take a quick screenshot and send it to hi@emilywilcox.com. You'll be entered into a drawing to win a free one-on-one Voxer coaching day with me, and you help the show reach more new listeners. Such a win-win. I also invite you to follow me on Instagram @mmakesmoney and to jump into my free Telegram community, The Money Club, which is linked in the show notes. Until next time, I'm sending you all the magic money vibes.